Good morning, Life.church. How you doing this morning? Come on, anybody glad to be here? All of our dads, we welcome you. So glad to have all of our dads here with you. And if you are a new dad, welcome to the Dad Club, and it is all downhill from here. It's about as good as it gets right there. No, it's awesome to be a dad. We're so honored to have all of our dads here. If you are a first-time dad or you are a bonus dad, the world calls them stepfathers, but we honor them as bonus dads because they do an incredible job, and we're just so thankful for all of our dads. And then for those of you that maybe have lost your father this year or have gone through a difficult season, we just want you to know that we love you, and we're just so honored that you are here celebrating with us today. After our experience this morning, we have a great gift for all of our dads as you're leaving, just something fun for you to have, to remember that today is the day that we're celebrating you and we love you. And then out in the lobby, who won that prize? He's going to be given out as a dress card in the lobby for the ribs tonight, so make sure you see him as well. Shake his hand, congratulate him, and get the address where you can go get some good dinner tonight. Amen? All right. Now he's like, I'm leaving now. I think he's leaving early right now. He's like, I'm out of the door. Stay to the end, I promise you. No, we're not going to come over to your house this week. It's next week. We're honored to have all of you here today and thankful that we are in week 3 of a series that we're calling Starting Point. And I don't know if you've ever thought about it this way, but everything has a starting point. Everything has a starting point somewhere along the way, but many times we don't think about our faith having a starting point. And when I ask you what was the starting point of your faith, a lot of times when we talk about that, we'll say, well, my mom drugged me to church, or maybe I came and I gave my life, and so the day I got baptized was my starting point, or something of that nature. But I want you to understand that your starting point of your faith was long before you were aware of it. Many times our starting point of our faith is even culturally what people say about God. If you were raised in a particular household that had a big faith tradition in it, or if you lived in a household that did not have a big faith tradition in it, that influenced your life and how you saw God and how you viewed God. Every faith tradition, though, has a starting point. Maybe it was your Sunday school teacher, maybe it was your mom or your dad. But when we take not just a microscopic look at our starting point of our faith, but we back out and we look at a macro view of what it is to have a starting point. Every faith tradition has a starting point. There are 3 big faith traditions in the world. There is Judaism, or to be a Jewish person. There's Islamic, or a Muslim, and then there's Christianity. They all have a starting point to their faith. And here's something that's very unusual and very unique about this, is that all 3 religious traditions have the same starting point of faith. Every one of them has the exact same starting point. And it's Abraham. They can trace back their starting point to Abraham. And it's not just the story of Abraham. And when I talk about faith traditions or the beginning of your faith, many of you are thinking, well, that's ancient history, Pastor Chad. I'm not really interested in my history. I'm not worried about what happened before or what churches did before. Many times when people are looking for a church, they want to know what the vision of that church is, or where is that church going? What does it stand for? And what is it going to look like in the future? We're worried about vision. We're worried about moving forward. And so a lot of times we're not worried about the history of it. And I want to encourage you to know the history of your faith, because it matters to you. It dictates how you see your faith and how you respond to trouble or trial or what's going on in your life. It dictates how you're going to view and how you're going to respond when difficulties come. But our faith traditions are not just in Abraham. They're also in Abraham and in you. You have a faith tradition that goes all the way back to Abraham, whether you realize it or not. And I want you to understand that every religious entity, the three major religious traditions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, all have their faith tradition started in the man by the name of Abraham. And Abraham's story is an incredible story because all three traditions all agree about this, that mankind had made a mess of their life. Like during Abraham's time, Abraham lived in a time where there were no country boundaries, there were no borders, if you will. There was lawlessness, and it was very tribal. And if one tribe was bigger than the other, and this tribe liked this tribe's land, they would go and just destroy them and wipe them out and take them all captive and then occupy their land. It was complete. It was like what we would call the Wild West, but it was actually the Wild East because it was further east. Bad joke, sorry. But you understand where it was mayhem around there because there was not the civility that you would have, and it got that way because men had made a mess of their life. And so it reminds me of like kind of being a dad. How many of you know, like, when your kids are quiet, it's time to be concerned? Like, I mean, honestly, you ever think about sometimes your kid's bugging you, like making a lot of noise bugs you, and like you're like, be quiet, you know? Have you ever, dads, I'm finding myself as a dad saying things that my father grew up saying. Like, I'm not trying to air condition the whole house, close the back door. Come on, the air conditioner's working, close the refrigerator. Come on. You know, like my kids love to go get a snack out of the fridge. And they decide they open the refrigerator, and what they want is not in the refrigerator, so they leave the refrigerator door open, and they go to the pantry. And then they leave the pantry door open, and they go back and forth between the two, and then I can't, it's like I become possessed with my father. I'm not trying to cool down the whole neighborhood. Close the refrigerator door. Come on, anybody know what I'm talking about? Parents just do that. And sometimes we'll be in our bedroom, and man, we'll hear our kids playing, and it's loud, and kids just make noise. But then there's that time that they get really quiet. And before you know it, you're like, I haven't heard the kids in a little while. I wonder what's going on. Because you know you're about to come into something that looks like World War III wherever they are. Like when they get really quiet, they do stuff like this. My boy took a rock and wrote, "I love you, Mom," on the side of her car. Oh, how could you kill him for that? But I could find a way. On your house that you're trying to sell, they take spray paint and they make a hopscotch right in the middle of your back patio in permanent spray paint. Kids, Amy was off one day, and it was just me and Grace at home. And I had one of those moments, like she was playing in another room, and I was kind of in my room studying or working on something, and all of a sudden, I hear something like this. Now, it might sound a little exaggerated, and it might be a little exaggerated, but that's what it sounded like to me. Like, I was like, did she drop a glass? Did she drop 10 glasses? Did she bring a trash bag in full of glass and then beat it and dump it all over the floor? I'm wondering these things. So I go out and I go look, and she was trying to get a glass off one of the shelves, and when she did, a couple others fell off. And again, it might sound a little exaggerated, but that's what it sounded like in the other room. And when I walked in there, there Gracie is, standing in the middle of a sea of glass all around her. There's glass, barefooted, and a little blood trickling down from one of her hands because she got cut. And she's got these big doe eyes, like, uh-oh, I'm in really big trouble, right? And I did what any good parent does. I shook my finger at her and I said, young lady, you have made a big mess, and I'm not going to lift a finger to help you clean this up. You're going to clean this all up by yourself. Now, because you have to clean up what you mess up. Can I get an amen from all the parents? I mean, that's what we should do, right? How many of you really believe that's what I did? What I did was, took my shoe, scraped some of the glass out this way, and scraped it out this way, and I kind of walked and crunched along on the duffel bag of glass that was on the ground, and I bent down, and I picked her up, and I carried her out of the mess that she had made. See, a lot of us have a view of God like that. Like when we've made a mess of our lives, that God is there to point his finger at us and say, now you need to get it together, and you need to clean this mess up, because you've got to clean up what you mess up. And many times, this is our historical view of God, because when we mess up, what do? We run from the house of God. We run from the church. We run from the things of God, because after all, we have made a mess, and God is going to knock us over the head, and he's going to punish us because we have made a mess. And many times, that's our view of God. And if that's your view of God, you have an incorrect view of God. So if you have that view of God, then here's the thing. Why did you laugh and think that I would do something different than God? Many of you, when I talked about pointing my finger at her and telling her to clean up her mess, you were laughing. You're like, yeah, right, he didn't really do that. Why? Why did you think that? Because no parent in their right mind would do that to their child. You thought I would rescue her. You thought that I would go out of my way to help her. And if you think that about me, and you think that I, being evil, can do that for her, then you think that I am godlier than God. That I'm better at doing God stuff than God. I want you to see how our view of God is so incorrect, and our view of the Lord is so flawed, that we think that that's what God would do. Because God looked down at the mess that humanity had made of itself, and he said, I'm going to come in and I'm going to rescue you from the junk that's in your life. You gotta look at it. And what happens is mankind had polluted everything. We had made a mess of this world. And God says, I'm going to help you out of this mess. And I've got to start somewhere. So he started in 1876 BC. 1876 years before Christ, God comes down and has a conversation with a man by the name of Abraham. And I want us to look at that conversation today, because it's a powerful conversation that you and I have. It affects us today. Watch what it says. Genesis chapter 12. The Lord had said to Abraham, leave your native country, leave your relatives, your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. And here he begins to give him 3 promises. He said, Abraham, I'm going to give you 3 promises for your life. I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to bless you and make you famous. You will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who have contempt with you. Number 2. Number 3, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you. 3rd promise. He said, I'm going to bless you and make you a great nation and make your name famous. I'm going to bless those who bless you, And then he says, all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. Genesis 12 records this conversation where God makes Abraham these three promises. And I want you to see how this affects us today. We're now 4,000 years removed from this conversation with Abraham. We're 4,000 years removed from this conversation. And I want to show you the promises of God. How many of you today, by a show of hands, how many of you today have ever heard of this man that I'm talking about by the name of Abraham before today's lesson? Come on, anybody ever heard of Abraham? We're 4,000 years removed, and you've heard of the man before this lesson today. I would say God made his name famous, don't you? I would say that's an answer to prayer, right? How many of you have ever been blessed by the life of Jesus? Has Jesus ever done anything for you? Jesus was a direct offspring of Abraham. And he said that was a prophetic promise that of the lineage of Jesus' lineage, that the entire world would be blessed because of Abraham. We just all testified that we're better because of the life of Jesus Christ. Every person in the planet has been blessed because of one man. Come on, that's a promise worth keeping, amen? Isn't that powerful? Look at the promises 4,000 years ago. They're still alive today. So Abraham, he leaves his father's land. He packs up what little possessions he has, and he begins to leave. He goes off into this land that God had promised him, and he begins to build his fortune. And in that day and age, and just along the trip, he has many journeys and many experiences that happen on this trip. One of the experiences, just to illustrate the lawlessness of this time, was Abraham was passing through this territory, and this guy who had a lot of money and a lot of armies, and he was very wealthy, meets with Abraham and says, hey man, that girl that's with you, she's kind of cute. And Abraham knows that if he says, well, that's my wife, the guy's going to kill him and he's going to take his wife. And he's thinking, do I want to live or do I want to let him take her? Do I want to live? And I know many of you guys have felt that at times with your wives. Bad joke again. I love you, honey. So Abraham says, it's my sister. It's my sister. And the guy takes her, and Abraham stays around for a while and then eventually fesses up that it's his wife, and the guy has compassion on him and lets him continue to go. But just show you the lawlessness of what Abraham's thinking was. He's like, I'm going to die because I'm married to a pretty girl. And that, I mean, that's how bad that area and that time frame was, and how much mayhem was going on. And so Abraham now has traveled. He's landed in the spot where he's going to live, and he's there. And the Bible, remember the promise I said a while ago, he's going to have a great nation. He's going to be a great nation. All the family's going to be blessed. Everybody's going to be blessed because of him. Anybody blesses him is going to be blessed. Anybody curses him is going to be cursed. And so we see now that Abraham is well into his later years, and Abraham starts to freak out a little bit because there is a tradition that if you die without an heir, all of your money and all of your stuff goes to the head servant of the household. And so Abraham is worried about this, that all of his stuff is going to be going to his head servant. And so he's worried about it a little bit, and then it starts a conversation again with God. Look at Genesis chapter 15. Then the Lord said to him, no, your servant will not be your heir. For you will have a son of your own, and he will be your heir. No, wait a second here. God had already made this promise to Abraham years ago. Abraham is now old and doesn't even think he can have children. His wife is old. They don't think they can have children now at this point. And Abraham is starting to worry. I want you to get the mind frame. God could have fulfilled this promise way back then when Abraham was a young man. But now he's an old man, and now he's got all this stuff to worry about, and he's freaking out about it. And God says, I'm going to reiterate my promise to you, Abraham. That your servant is not going to be your inheritance. It's not going to inherit your stuff. You're going to have a son, and he will be your heir. Now watch this, verse 5. Now I've preached about this story, and I've preached about Abraham a long time. And there's parts of the story that I've seen just for the very first time. It's like it leaped out. Watch what it says. Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. How many descendants will you have? Now, I know like here, we live close to New Orleans, and believe it or not, when there's cities close by, and we live in a small city, that it affects how much of the sky you can see. So like if you've ever been in a big city and you look up at the sky, you're like, God says, hey, okay, Abraham, look up. Abraham's like, look up and look at the stars. How many stars can you see? And he's like, 4. Oh, wait, that's the moon. No, wait, that's Mars. No, that's not going to work. Okay, 3. I'm going to have 3 kids. Thanks, God. That's a lot. Appreciate it. I had the privilege one time of going to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. It's a little island. It's where the Wright brothers started. They did their first flight was there. There's a chain of islands. They call it the Outer Banks. And when I was out there, I went out one night, and there's no city lights. It's 45 miles off the coast of Carolina, and so there's no lights from the mainland of the United States there. And it's the first time in my life I saw the Milky Way. And I'm telling you, there were so many stars in the heavens. Literally, the sky was white because of the beautiful stars. And I just I'm thinking, out there on that Judean hillside, Abraham looks up and says, oh my goodness, look at how big this promise is. God said, I'm going to make you a great nation. And I want you to understand that the Jewish people and the Islamic people have the same starting point. It's Abraham. When they both trace back their faith traditions, it all goes back to Abraham. And that's why they don't like each other and they fight. There's a lot that goes into it. But watch what Abraham says in verse 6. I'm telling you, folks, I've preached this. I've seen this a lot. It's the first time, and it hit me. And Abraham believed the Lord. And the Lord counted him as righteousness because of his faith. Wait a minute. God, I know I'm old. My wife and I are not, we can't really have. He didn't say any of that. He said, Abraham, you're going to have a son. And Abraham was, okay. How many times has God made us promises and given us things, and we want to tell God all the reasons why he can't? And the Bible says when Abraham heard God, he said, okay. And let me rephrase it for you. Could it be that trusting God results in right standing with God? That trusting God puts us in right standing with God? You see, a lot of times religion makes it hard to live for God. We come up with all these rules and all this stuff, and we can get it so complicated about living for God. What if serving God was as simple as you saying, okay, God? Trusting God, Abraham started his faith. See, the Jews had this idea later on as they went, that because they were of the lineage of Abraham, that they were automatically right with God. That because they were Jewish people, like in Jesus' day, they had the Pharisees, and they like, well, in order to be right with God, it's because of, we're Jews. It's because of their birth. Look, we were born a Jew, so because of the family I was born into, I'm automatically okay with God. And then a little later on, the Muslims came along and they said, well, we don't have that same lineage, and we trace our lineage a different way. It's not necessarily how you were born, it was how you behave. Allah says if you treat one another okay. It's how you treat one another, and you love one another, and you're nice to people, and you make people feel at peace. And so it's your behavior. It's behavior gets you right with God. That's how you get right with God. And you really never know if you're right with God according to the Muslims until Allah comes and redeems you. Then maybe if you've done enough stuff, you've earned your way into heaven. And then Christians, we came along, and right after Jesus is gone, Christians said, well, in order to become right with God, you got to become a Jew first. They said you got to go back and obey the Jewish law, and then you have to modify your behavior to fit all of this. And so it's belief and behavior and all this mixed bag. And so we're all here, but what if the starting point of your relationship with God is trust? Trust. God, you want to save me. I'm going to start my relationship with you today by saying yes. Okay, God. Maybe you are serving God, and you're like, man, God, I know you got more for me, and you want to use me in a ministry, and you want to do it. But I don't feel like I can. I don't feel like I have the ability. What if the starting point of what God wants to do in your life is just simply you saying yes to Him? But I got to figure all this stuff out, and I've got to get all this stuff. That's where trust comes in. Because I trust that God's going to love me and be there for me even when I'm not enough. Wait, I can imagine that conversation with Abraham and God. Okay, God, let me understand this right. I trusted you because and God's like, look, Abe, listen. You believed me. So all that stuff in the past, we're not going to worry about that. Matter of fact, remember that little thing with your wife and saying she was your sister? We're just going to laugh about that. That was just something funny that happened. Right then, He said, Abraham, you're in right standing with me. See, Christianity, we can make things really hard to get to God. In order to get to God, you got to come to church, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to. And we got highway here and a low thing over here and a rule over here, and it's this curvy road. God's been really working on me for the last few weeks during some of my sabbatical break, and really been thinking about this and how as I want to do my best as a pastor and as a leader to make it easy to get to God. Like, I want to make it simple to get to God. I think we can make it so complicated that people just give up. What happens if there's one verse of the Bible that says we're going to bring the high things low, and we're going to bring the low things up, and we're going to straighten out the curvy ways. What if it was just that simple for you to get to God? Was you simply said, yes, Jesus, I'm going to trust you. What about all this other stuff, Pastor? What about all the things that I've done in the past and all the mistakes I made? What if it was that simple that we got back to the starting point of our faith, or we just trusted God and said, God, you're a good God. And I don't have the answer. I know the doctor just gave me a report I don't like, but God, I trust you. I don't like the circumstances that I'm going through right now, and I don't know how I'm going to get out of it all. I don't have all the answers. But trust you. What if that was the beginning? And because of that trust, God says, you know what? You're in right standing with me. You're okay with me. But I'm not in right standing with my mom, and I'm not in right standing with my dad, and my co-workers don't like me. God says, I'm not that complicated. He's like, save the drama for your mama. Just trust me. When I was a kid, a young man, I was driving at the time, and I was out with some friends doing some things that I shouldn't have been doing. We were riding around town, and they were building a subdivision. And the subdivision had the roads there, but the lots were not formed yet. And we decided we wanted to go four-wheeling in our cars. And I did not have a four-wheel drive car. And I got stuck in the mud in the middle of the night. And I got in trouble. And all my friends left me. Some friends, right? I'm out in the middle of nowhere, stuck in my car at 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning. What do you do? Who do you call? I'm in a mess. My dad happened to be working that night. I called my dad. And he drove up in his patrol car because he was a policeman. And he wrote me a ticket. I'm just kidding. No, he did. And he pulled me out. And he told me to go home and wash my car in the morning. I could have called a lot of people. But in that moment, I could have took it on the fear of everyone else. Man, don't call your dad, especially if he's a cop. He's going to kill you. But somewhere along the way, I trusted the heart of my dad that he was going to rescue me when no one else would. If I have that kind of confidence in him being evil, how much more confidence should I have in my Heavenly Father? I want to just challenge you today. Abraham believed the Lord, as the band comes out, and it credited to him as righteousness. Trusting God results in right standing with God. I don't know where you are in your faith journey. I don't know what you're walking through today. But would you stand with me today, if you don't mind, as we wrap up? Maybe you found yourself in a place where you don't know how you're going to get out of it or what's going to go on. And you're just wondering, I don't know what I'm going to do. Can I tell you, the starting point of your faith is simply trusting God. If God said it, I believe it. He's going to make it so. But Pastor Chad, I messed up a lot this past week. I still trust God's going to forgive me today. I'm telling you, this works in every stage of your walk with God. Trusting God is the starting point of your faith life. So I want you to just bow your heads right where you are. And before I pray for you, just really quickly, I forgot to mention something this morning when I started. Starting not tonight, but next Sunday night. Everybody say next Sunday night. Next Sunday night, after our Spanish experience, we're going to start a stage renovation for our platform here, for our stage. If there's any guys that are available that would like to help out at night or during the day, we're going to be raising the stage up a little bit, changing it up, just kind of got to do some structural things to it, trying to improve it a little bit. Our church is growing, and so we've got to make it a little bit more functional for us. And so, Kenneth, raise your hands. Kenneth, if you'll see him after service, he'll take your name and phone number. We're going to try to do it all in 1 week, because we're going to end Sunday night after our Spanish experience, and we want it to be pretty for the next Sunday morning so we don't interrupt any of our worship experiences. So if you can help out, just see him, and we'd appreciate it. I'll be here. We'll have a team here each night trying to get it all done. But thank you so much. And let me just pray for you. I just trust God. I trust God that God's going to talk to your heart today, that his word has been real in your life. Father, I thank you today for what you're doing in our hearts and our lives. Thank you that you're not complicated. You're not hard to know. You're not difficult. But just simply saying yes to you can change the trajectory of our life. It's the starting point of our faith. So, Father, I thank you today that you love us so completely and so real. In Jesus' name.